Shifting gears now here at home, the American dream of homeownership may be slipping a little further away. The Wall Street says the average mortgage payment has nearly doubled under President Biden. It's more than $3,300 a month today. So the question is, does renting make more sense, at least for now? Here to weigh in is Fox Business anchor David Asman. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about this.
Yeah. Actually, my first house was in your neck of the woods in Cape Cod in Massachusetts. And I was lucky enough to get into a low mortgage rate, and I eventually paid it off because I figured I'd rather have the money than pay a bank for it. And luckily I could do that. You got a low mortgage too. But just to put a fine point on that figure that you mentioned, it is now anywhere from $1,700 to $1,900 is what it was when Biden took office for monthly payments if you have a mortgage. It's now $3,300 a month. That's a 90% increase. And you know, really owning a home is one of the most fundamental parts of the American dream. Also having your own business, and there are other parts of it, but home ownership is the core of the American dream. And that part of the American dream is disappearing because people just can't find it. As high as rents are right now, people realize it is probably cheaper to have a rent than pay these fees. So it's really a struggle. And that's one reason why Americans think the economy's bad.
Yeah, when I really feel for the people that were on the cusp, you know, they were almost there, they were going to get that first home, and then those interest rates crept up. And when you do, you hop into any mortgage calculator, you see what a big impact those interest rates have. So how do you even get started?
Well, the people who are trying to buy their first house are the ones that are struggling the hardest, because mostly they're young, they've never owned a place before, and they can't jump into it. And there's so much insecurity because their monthly expenses have skyrocketed in the past 3 years. Now, inflation is coming down a little. The rate of increase is not as high as when it was 9% about a year and a half ago. But it is still high compared to where it was when Joe Biden took office. And the reason why mortgage rates are so high is because the Federal Reserve has been raising rates to try to kill inflation. Now, that's one way you can kill inflation. Another way, a better way, is to increase incentives to produce more goods, because the more goods you have in the economy, the lower inflation is as well. That would be tax cuts, regulatory cuts. But do you see any regulatory cuts coming from the Biden administration? Tax cuts? I don't see any. Luckily, they haven't raised taxes, but I don't see any tax cuts coming from this administration at all, because they have these trillion-dollar spending plans, and that's what's causing inflation. And the Fed trying to kill inflation is what's causing rates to go up. So it all comes back to what happened 3 years ago when we got new leadership in the White House.
Yeah, there are some trends that show things are looking a little bit better, that interest rates are going to tick down a little bit. Yeah. So if you're someone that's on the cusp of renting or buying and trying to make a decision, do you get in now? Do you buy and then hope that you can refinance somewhere down the road, or do you keep renting? You
know, people who are trying to figure out, you know, they take out a pad and a pen and try to figure out how much their monthly expenses realize that they just can't do it. Well, another thing that's growing in a bad way is debt. Consumer debt, and a lot of people are using their credit cards to pay for it. So, and some of these credit cards, if you're overdue, you can pay 29% interest. It's just extraordinary. So when they're factoring all that in, how much debt they now hold because they've been using the debt to pay for inflation, essentially, they just can't do it. They literally can't pay. They'd go into bankruptcy if they tried to buy a house. So it literally is off the table. There are other things off the table, like starting a new business. The new business startups are a problem as well. So the good thing is the American economy is the best in the world right now, and there is a lot of money. You can see that in the stock market. Foreigners are pouring money in because it's the only place where you have the hope of something growing eventually. And frankly, I think some people are hoping for a change in leadership as well.
We'll see what 2024 brings. A lot of people watching a lot of things, as you mentioned, an election year as well.
Molly, I'll see you in Cape Cod.
That would be wonderful, right? We'll wait for some warmer weather, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, David Osman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike? As this data shows, more and more Californians are fleeing their state in droves. The Golden State saw a population decline for a third year in a row last year. William LaJeunesse, live in Los Angeles. They're in the Golden State with more on this. William.
Well, Molly, many argue that the state is beginning to pay the price for its progressive politics. Why? Because the state isn't just losing population to other states, about 750,000 in the last several years, but also revenues. California now projecting a record $68 billion deficit. But the bigger story here is who is leaving. For the first time, more highly educated, upwardly mobile, high-earning professionals are leaving the state than coming in. Now, why is that a big deal? Because these are the taxpayers who foot the bill for the state's progressive politics, programs, universities, and pensions.
The one percenters, which is about 150,000, 160,000 people at a state of 40 million, are paying nearly half of the income taxes.
So no state is more dependent on the wealthy. The top 1% pay 45% of the income tax in California. Their rate about 13.3%. That, combined with the state's high cost of housing, double the national average, is driving people away.
I'm seeing anywhere from 2 to 5 clients a month calling me and saying we're leaving, and it's not the younger people anymore. It's the age bracket of 55 to 65. And the reason that they're leaving, that they're giving me, is primarily for tax reasons.
So if you combine, you take the loss of those high-income retiring baby boomers who are trying to stretch their 401ks, along with the flight of those high-earning professionals who are going elsewhere, that means a 25% drop in state income tax revenues and perhaps a loss in state services. Although with this, Santa Claus rally that people are talking about, Molly, that may change things. But where are people going? They're going to lower tax Arizona, no tax Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada. Back to you.
Got to think about things in the long term, and people are going to make those decisions. Thank you, William Lajeunesse. Appreciate it.
I think Trump could win. He could win in Pennsylvania.
It sounds to me like you think if the election were held today, Biden would lose.
Well, me and everybody else.
Democrats raising red flags about President Biden's re-election bid as the president's poll numbers suffer in key swing states like his home state of Pennsylvania. Washington Examiner national political reporter Selena Zito joins us now. Selena, good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
So there was an interesting exchange between a Politico reporter and John Fetterman, the senator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let's put it on the screen. Fetterman responds about a question about the president's poll numbers. There's a whole lifetime in politics between now and next November. While there are Democrats that are being very critical about the president, I'll use this as another opportunity to tell James Carville to shut the bleep up. It is a family program. I won't go further than that. But what do you make of that, Selena?
Well, I'm not surprised, and he's not wrong. As we all know, there is an entire lifetime in American politics. If you look at a snapshot right now of President Biden, he is in trouble, but that doesn't mean that he can't regain it. I think the onus is on him to get out there and campaign and talk with voters and be more accessible. But you have to remember, Fetterman has always had a keen understanding of what's going on in the state. He ran for the U.S. Senate the first time in 2016. He lost in a primary, but he stunned everyone with two reasons. He came in very strong for someone who was just the mayor of a town of 1,800 people. But also after he'd going around the state, he said, Trump could win this year, and you all aren't paying attention to that. And so I think it would be foolhardy to dismiss what Fetterman is saying, because he does have good political instincts. But, Pennsylvania, of all the battleground states, is going to be the hardest for both. But if it's Trump and Biden, it's going to be the hardest for both to win. While the voters are trending more Republican in voter registration, last year in 2022, still last year, 2022, Republicans got creamed. They lost the governor's race. They lost the Senate race. They lost the state house majority. So Republicans are not in a great place in terms of what they've done in the last election cycle. So I think Pennsylvania is a state where anything can happen.
to your home Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Let's take a look at some numbers. More than 35,000 Democrats have switched to the Republican Party. More than 15,000 Republicans have switched to the Democratic Party. A net loss of nearly 20,000 voters for the Democratic Party. Is that a warning sign for President Biden?
Yeah, absolutely. You never want people to leave your party, in particular if you are the cause. So he has to figure out what is not working, what part of his message is not working. It could be a number of reasons. I think that voter registration change is very reflective of how the coalitions in the party have changed. Philadelphia suburbs used to be very Republican. They're now becoming very Democrat. The West, where I live, used to be very Democrat. It's now becoming very conservative. So that's why I still think Pennsylvania is going to be battled for all the way up to the finish line, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be one that both men, if it's Trump and Biden, who fight to the finish for this state, and it's the state to watch.
Then there's the president's cabinet secretaries juggling multiple crises while the president's on holiday in the Caribbean. You have the DHS secretary struggling to contain the migrant surge, Secretary of State trying to take out Hamas, and the defense secretary countering threats from Iran. Is that bad optics heading into an election year?
Oh, yeah. Anytime you have those kinds of optics that are telling you that there are, and you're juggling multiple crises, that's always a problem for an administration and ultimately for a president's reelection. The border crisis was seen for a long time as only something that Republican voters cared about. But we have seen, again, the coalition changed along the border states, and seats in Congress that were once held by Democrats for generations are now being held by Republicans. So it's become a multi-party problem and a multi-party crisis. And I'm still befuddled is maybe the word, by the lack of addressing this by Biden and by the administration.
Selena Zito from the Washington Examiner, great to see you. Busy year ahead in politics. Thanks so much.
See you out there. Thank you.
It's a little dark out there, but we are looking at Moscow, Idaho. This as demolition crews are tearing down the house where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered nearly a year ago. Could that crime scene still hold crucial evidence? Relatives of the victims fear that is the case. The trial slated for next year. Plus, a senior Israeli defense minister warns the war in Gaza could soon expand as fighting between the IDF and Hamas intensifies.
The all-in-one and done symptom relief of Mucinex is delivered fast with DoorDash, so you don't have to leave the couch. Boom!
That was fast.
Mucinex, available on DoorDash. It's comeback season.
My son was always
fast. The crews were here early this morning. They had streets blocked off, and those walls are coming down. Now, the families of Xana Kernodle and Kaylee Gonzalez, 2 of the 4 victims killed in that pre-dawn stabbing last year, released a statement last night expressing their deep disappointment with the university for going forward with having the crime scene ripped down before this case goes to trial. They say they still have questions regarding the home. They say they want to know what sounds could be heard from the bottom of the house, or whether the decks provided potential access points for the accused killer, who in this case is Brian Kohberger. Take a listen.
In a jury trial, you never know what might be valuable. And so, the family feels like the house is a huge piece of evidence. It's the crime scene. You don't know what's going to need it, or when it's going to be needed, or if it's going to be needed at all.
However, in an email to university officials, the prosecuting attorney in this county said he does not anticipate investigators or the prosecuting team needing the house any further, writing in part, quote, based on our review of Idaho case law, the current condition of the premises is so substantially different than at the time of the homicides that a jury view would not be authorized. I also met with a university spokesperson last night. She tells me that the students have a voice, that they want this house gone.
They look at it every day. They walk past it every day. There continue to be outsiders coming into town who want to see the house and are in that area. They knock on their doors. They harass them. So we're definitely listening to our students, listening to our community, and ready to help them take that next step in healing.
Now, a trial date has not been set in this case. Yes, the prosecution did file a request last week asking for this case to go to trial next summer when the school year is over. But again, you can see that house is coming down fast. That's something that some of those families wanted to stay in place, but it is being ripped apart. Back to you.
Pre-dawn demolition in Moscow, Idaho. Christina Coleman, thanks very much. Molly?
I want to bring in Mark Furman now. He's retired LAPD detective and a Fox News contributor. Mark, this story was incredibly gripping as it was unfolding. Our hearts pouring out for these families, the loss of their loved one. A killer remained on the loose for several weeks until authorities announced the arrest of who they believe is the killer, Brian Kohberger, who has yet to go to trial. But here we're watching the building being demolished, and we know that at least some of the family members of the victims have concerned that evidence could also be destroyed, something that might be useful to a jury somewhere down the road. Your thoughts as we're watching this?
Well, I think this has become an emotional issue. It's not a probative issue. Certainly the house has been altered significantly. Walls have been removed, sheetrock, pieces of the floor. There's no longer furnishings. And of course, any evidence of blood or a struggle or the homicide specifically have been removed, retrieved. So I think people don't understand that a jury walkthrough would be more confusing than helpful. That's the first thing. The jury would not get a lead through by a detective or a prosecutor or a defense attorney, nor could they ask questions, nor could they talk with each other. They wouldn't be in deliberation. It would actually be more confusing than helpful. The law enforcement agencies involved with this investigation have gone completely as extensive as they can to document as the scene was seen, as the scene was processed, as the evidence was retrieved, photographic, videos, digital scanning. All these agencies have created something that the jury will get far greater information from than actually going on a field trip to the home.
Yeah, I guess one of the points being made is that this scene is so dramatically altered because of the collection of evidence that a jury trip would not have been an in-the-moment type of thing where they would see the scene as it was, and instead there'll be videotape and pictures, as you're mentioning. I guess the crux of this and the concern that's being raised is that, is there any way that this could somehow be of benefit to the defense?
No, not at all, because the defense agreed with the prosecution to demolish the house. They had no objection. There's no appeal process for this. There's no unfair trial. He's going to get his day in court, and he agreed. Brian Kohberger agreed with his defense counsel that they would not oppose the destruction of the house. They know that it would actually be against them in their motions in court, not for them. And the prosecution also knows it would be highly confusing for the jury, and this rarely happens. This rarely happens. This is the theatrics of a case that hits national screens that people go through walkthroughs. This is not the normal course.
All right. Thank you, Mark Furman. We appreciate your insights this morning and want to wish you a happy new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The city of Chicago that won't be able to maintain this mission. It's the entire country that is now at stake.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson with that dire warning for the rest of the United States. What will the country do now that December is poised to break records of migrant and
Deadly fight over Christmas presents takes a very bizarre turn here. 14-year-old DeMarcus Coley is in custody after allegedly fatally shooting his sister. Officials say the fight started over who got more presents. His older brother then turned around and shot the teen. Allegedly, he's in custody too. Senior correspondent Steve Harrigan untangling all of this from Atlanta for us. Steve, to you.
Molly, it is hard to untangle. This is truly a grim Christmas story. The Coley family near St. Petersburg, Florida. They were out Christmas shopping on Sunday. Younger brother, 14-year-old DeMarcus, getting jealous. He felt, according to law enforcement, that his older brother, Darkus, was getting more presents. The argument continued after they returned home to their grandmother's house. DeMarcus pulled out a .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol, pointed it at his brother's head. An uncle intervened, took DeMarcus outside. Then the sister, Ariel, 23-year-old mother of two, came out. She rebuked DeMarcus, saying, "It's Christmas, don't fight." DeMarcus then pulled the pistol again, shot his sister. One bullet through the arm, punctured her lung, killed her. This mother of two was carrying a 10-month-old infant at the time. The infant dropped, fell, but was unhurt. So now we have a situation where 8 seconds later, Darkus runs out of the house and shoots his brother, DeMarcus, in the stomach, throws the gun and runs. Both brothers arrested. Here's what the sheriff had to say.
I really think that we need tougher laws to deal with these kids. As you can see with their criminal histories, they are not getting the consequences that they should get that keep them from doing it again and again and again, or deterring others from doing it again and again and again.
Law enforcement said both of these brothers had criminal histories from age 12. As it stands now, 14-year-old charged with first-degree murder. His 15-year-old brother charged with attempted first-degree murder. 23-year-old sister dead. Two children, aged 10 months and 6 years old, both now orphans. Molly, back to you.
Just terrible and heartbreaking for this family. And I think of the grandmother, you know, that this is what she's seeing on a Christmas day. Absolutely heartbreaking. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for that report. So sad.
A second American hostage held by Hamas has tragically been declared dead. Judy Weinstein Haggai and her husband Good, both in their early 70s, were shot and injured in their kibbutz during the October 7th terror attack. Good was declared dead just last week. Their bodies are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. They are among the 8 Americans held hostage by the terror group. Our condolences to their family. The IDF releasing new video of its troops' activity on the ground in the Gaza Strip as it works to eliminate Hamas. Israel's military chief making it very clear that its war on Hamas would grind on for months. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Mike Emanuel. Hello,
and I'm
Molly.
Molly Line. Bill and Dana are off today. Happening overnight, Israeli forces conducting a raid in the West Bank, leading to the arrest of 21 suspects who the IDF says helped finance Hamas through digital currency and cash. Israeli media reporting those arrested worked as foreign exchange brokers with at least tens of millions in Israeli currency being confiscated. Trey Yingst is live in Tel Aviv, Israel, with the very latest on this. Trey, to you.
Hey, Molly, good morning. I do want to start with the latest out of the West Bank, where overnight Israeli forces launched new raids against Palestinian militants and infrastructure. Reports do indicate the raids targeted 10 separate cities, notably the West Bank city of Ramallah. A number of arrests were made at other locations, and a money exchange shop was reportedly raided. Further south in the Gaza Strip, it is day 83 of the war between Israel and Hamas. And after expanding ground operations, the Israelis are facing fierce resistance. 167 Israeli soldiers have been killed since the invasion began, with thousands more injured. The Israelis are using infantry troops backed by tanks and air support to clear new areas. But each day, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are launching new attacks using RPGs and roadside bombs. As the conflict continues, the humanitarian situation in Gaza is deteriorating for the more than 2 million Palestinians living there. The war is especially challenging for some of Gaza's most vulnerable residents, those like Abir Abu Sakran, a deaf woman whose daughter has autism. War is very difficult. I see people upset, and it's hard for them. Abir signs, I struggle a lot in the war. There's hardly any food, and it's challenging to find supplies. The United Nations estimates 1.9 million Palestinians are internally displaced, many living in tents near the southern city of Rafah. at a food kitchen in the south of Gaza. Civilians line up to wait for their next meal. The food here is far from enough to feed so large a number of people. Abdul Hakim Mathoun explains, "I got my food today, but sometimes I am not so lucky." On the humanitarian front, 115 aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip yesterday. The Israelis say at the request of the United Nations, they actually closed the Kerem Shalom inspection point because there were so many trucks going in at one point, they weren't able to keep up with the flow on the other side of the border. Molly.
And we understand that they're finding new tunnels there in Gaza, Trey.
Yeah, the Israelis releasing new video today, and it's an interesting video. It shows a drone that goes into a mosque in the central part of the Gaza Strip, and as it flies in, you can actually see where this tunnel entrance is located in the mosque. Now, the Israelis say there were civilians sheltering in this location at one point, and that this video illustrates just how close the civilian population is to the infrastructure beneath Gaza. Molly.
Wow, remarkable video. They've released so much video, giving us more and more insight into what IDF troops face there every day. Trey Yanks, thank you very much. Fascinating update. We appreciate it. Mike?
Molly, Republican lawmakers are ramping up their investigation into President Biden. They're looking into obstruction allegations to determine whether the president was involved in his son Hunter's plan to defy a subpoena for deposition this month. If so, it could be an impeachable offense. Lucas Tomlinson is live in St. Croix, where the president and his family are spending their New Year's holiday. Lucas?
Mike, top House Republican committee chairmen have written a letter to White House counsel saying they're expanding their investigation into the president. We're going to read you part of that letter, which says, quote, "In light of an official statement from the White House that President Biden was aware in advance that his son Hunter Biden would knowingly defy 2 congressional subpoenas." Here was House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer on Hannity last night.
And they can't answer a simple question. What did you do to receive the money? They also know that Joe Biden stated during the campaign he never met with any of these people who sent his family money, and that he had a wall between the government and his family's shady business schemes.
And here's our own Peter Doocy with an exchange with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre earlier this month about Hunter Biden defining that subpoena and what his father knew about it.
The president was familiar with what Hunter was going to say today. Look, he's proud of his son. He and the First Lady are proud of his son, how he's rebuilding his life back. He's going to focus on what is needed on the American people.
Hunter Biden faces his first trial in court on January 11th. He makes his first court appearance on those tax charges. Of course, isn't the first time family members of the president have made money. Recall Billy Carter made a lot of money on Billy Beer and hawking and selling that good old boy persona, all pretty harmless stuff. He then later accepted $220,000 from Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi and made several trips to Libya, Mike.
Lucas Tomlinson with the backdrop of the day in St. Croix. Lucas, thanks very much. Molly?
Let's bring in Rich Lowry. He's the National Review Editor-in-Chief. Thanks for being here. Happy New Year to you. I want to start by getting your reaction.
I'd rather be in St. Croix, but it's
I
good to be
know,
here.
right? We're all so jealous, right? That's okay. We got a pretty good perch here. The House GOP probe, now they're delving into what President Biden may have known regarding what Hunter did the day he did not actually go into the deposition that he was called to attend there on Capitol Hill, where Hunter went and he gave kind of this speech and then disappeared, and everyone was like, where did Hunter go? So they want to know if the president knew about it, was he involved in it? And the thought here is that could be kind of a contempt of Congress sort of angle and lead to a potential impeachable offense. Your thoughts on that angle?
Well, we can assume that the president knew everything Hunter was going to do. I mean, it's extremely sensitive matter with major political implications. Of course, the president knew. I think, though, making this part of the impeachment is probably a stretch. You know, it's sort of contempt of Congress by proxy, which is not as serious as the core of this investigation, which is the money. And the investigation has been a major success, unearthing these millions of dollars that went sluicing into Hunter's accounts, the family's accounts, and some of it, we now have checks, from the context of a year ago, have been utterly shocking, checks to Joe Biden from his brother and from Hunter, including $40,000 of a $400,000 tranche of money from China, which is 10%, which is the 10% for the big guy that we've heard, various talk of over the years. So I think that's the main thing. That's the core of it. And this feels good.
I think you raise exactly the point that I've been thinking about when I saw that this was an angle under approach that the GOP was taking. They essentially, the Oversight Committee chairs, James Comer and Chairman Jim Jordan, they essentially write a letter to the White House counsel and kind of complaining. They say Ms. Jean-Pierre declined to provide any further details about the president's actions on whether the president approved of his son defying congressional subpoenas. Why take this angle where, as you mentioned, there's all of these other things, that paperwork that they've been revealing and documents and phone calls and things like that? So why take this angle?
Yeah, well, again, I do not think it's the main thing, but I think there's a case that turnabout is fair play. The Democrats went after Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, and others in a major way to know what they advised Trump to do during the Mueller investigation, when Trump was considering various means of being highly uncooperative. And this was a big deal, and they tried to make a huge stink out of it, and it dragged on for months and months and months. So I think the Republicans are probably thinking turnabout is fair play. And, contempt of Congress is not a minor matter. So I think it's disgraceful that Hunter showed up, just outside the door, but wouldn't actually go inside the door and comply with the subpoena. Now, it doesn't mean he has to testify, right? He probably would have taken the fifth if he actually showed up, but it is disgraceful. So they're going to squeeze every ounce they can out of it. But again, this is not, if Joe Biden ends up being impeached, this is not going to be the main count.
Quick to the other side of the aisle, there's something that GOP in Colorado are working on. They're asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn this ruling disqualifying Trump from the 2024 ballot. The Colorado Republican Party, this petition they write, says by excluding President Trump from the ballot, the Colorado Supreme Court engaged in an unprecedented disregard for the First Amendment right of political parties to select the candidates of their choice and an usurpation of the rights of the people to choose their elected officials. Your thoughts?
Well, they're absolutely right. And this is one criticism you can make of that decision. There are many others you can make. And there's no way it's going to stand. The Supreme Court will take this up. It has to, right? It can't have, we can't have other states kind of aping Colorado and have it up for grabs whether the leading Republican candidate's going to be on the ballot in a bunch of states or not. And the Supreme Court will strike it down. The Colorado decision is deeply flawed on many grounds, foremost of which is just a bad interpretation of the 14th Amendment. I mean, this provision of the 14th Amendment is supposed to involve, active engagement in a real, no kidding, civil war, insurrection against the United States government, and giving a speech, even if you don't like it, on January 6th, doesn't constitute that. So this will not stand.
Eyes on the Supreme Court on this one. Rich Lowry, thank you so very much for your thoughts this morning. We appreciate it. Happy New Year to you.
We are again seeing a record number of crossing at our southern border. What that means for us in New York City is another surge in migrants arriving at our doors.
Mayor Eric Adams slamming the crisis at the border as sanctuary cities scramble to handle the renewed flood of migrants.